if it's me or what, but I hear a beeping sound that is not going away.
People are
Anyways,
coming to info.
oh, I see, I
It's
see.
people joining. Let me
Oh, okay,
switch off that sound.
okay, please.
Yes, it's
Thank you
off.
very much. So someone says it never ends the academic year. Parents prioritize the school calendar, so it's actually a tug of war. So, and I think that's what I wanted to bring to our attention. The program should take into consideration availability of children in December and January. Children may be on holidays with parents. Okay, and I think that's what we wanted to maybe stimulate us to think about. That firstly, the Pathfinder calendar is not set in isolation or in a vacuum, but our programs of the club are not the only thing that children are doing. They also busy with their schoolwork. They are busy with their work at home. They are busy with their social life development, and you name it. So there's a whole lot of things that take place in the life of the child, but also there's too many people who are competing for the same child and the attention of that child. So we need to be mindful of the fact that it's a very competitive space. We are not just merely taking children who are sitting at home bored, not knowing what to do, but we are taking children from a space that is already fully occupied. And we are saying to them, we're going to offer you an alternative program that demands your attention, and we expect the children to come and give their attention wholeheartedly to that which we are presenting. And let me try and do this club programming. I think that should be it. So you'll excuse me just a little bit. I'm not going to put this on PowerPoint just yet because I wanted to write this, our view of programming, as our second slide. And then, okay, I'm sorry. I'm writing the wrong English. And then I wanted to write here the key thoughts that came through: planning and programming. That's what came through. And we also spoke, I'm not going to write everything we spoke about. We also spoke about 10 months as the duration for our programs. And we spoke about a Pathfinder year in our curriculum. Sorry, I'm just trying to type as fast as I can. So those are some of the concepts that were shared. On our next slide, when you look at the manual speaks. I tried to make this thing white so that we can all read without problems. It says to develop familiarity with the activity, and these are our objectives when we deal with programming, our objectives, because without objectives, then we are just merely functioning and existing without necessarily fulfilling our objective or doing that which needs to be done. So it's to develop familiarity with activities and features that form the Pathfinder program. So we cannot begin to drive a car that we do not know how it operates. And once we have learned and familiarized ourselves with a car, is it manual, is it automatic, is it petrol, or is it diesel? Then we can begin to embark on the activities of going to where this car must take us now, which is the destination. So before we embark on the journey, we need to be sure of where we are going. So we need to have an understanding, a full understanding of what the activities are and what the features are that define or form a Pathfinder program, but to also provide a background for leaders that will enable them to plan, coordinate a successful ministry within a local Pathfinder club. And I think it is important that we know that all our efforts, as far as programming is concerned, from conference, division, union, GC level, all our efforts are aimed and geared towards one person only, or one institution, and that is the Pathfinder Club at the local church. So the Pathfinder Club, if you were to speak in Adventist terms, when we speak of the highest decision-making body in the church, we would call it the local church. So the local church is the highest decision-making body. So even now, when we deal with the pathfindering or Pathfinder ministry, our focus, our aim is to empower the club. And I think we need to keep that at the back of our minds, that when we work with the conference director, our goal is the club. And of course, with the club comes Pathfinders. So any programming that we embark on, maybe the biggest question we need to ask ourselves is, how are we reaching and meeting the needs of this Pathfinder, this child? How are we edifying and improving the club? And how are we fulfilling the objectives of the Pathfinder ministry with our programs? Now, there's a culture within the church where we find ourselves stuck with programs more than how those programs benefit the children. We find ourselves, there's a hand that is raised, Brother Nondaba. I'm not sure, how do we deal with hands? Do we speak or keep taking hands, or do we take hands at the end? I'm comfortable with any.
We take hands at the end.
At the end, that's fine. Okay. So we do not want Pathfinder clubs that are program oriented and leadership that is program oriented without being mission driven. What is the mission of the club? And I'm sure the other presenters will cover on some of those things. So when we do our programming, we need to have regular meetings. That is what is important. There needs to be regular meetings, because the more we can speak to one another, the more we communicate, the lesser the chances that we might find ourselves not finding each other. So plan more, talk more, discuss more, but so that when we get to a stage where we are executing, we don't find ourselves leaving anyone behind. So we need to plan our regular meetings, meetings that will be there on our Pathfinder calendar. We need to plan our bi-monthly events, our camp outs, conference activities, Pathfinder classes, and our program of development, and objectives that we need to reach throughout the Pathfinder year need to inform our programming for the year. So we cannot, and I think I've mentioned this earlier, we cannot plan without meeting our objectives. And the aim is to meet the growing needs of junior youth. Brethren, we must be honest with every participant that is here today. The world has been competing for the attention of young people for as long as we have been on this planet. And children are susceptible to influence. And we need to ensure that we win their attention amidst everything that is competing for their attention. Lead Pathfinders through a course of study towards final recognition in investiture as a means of reaching many objectives. So what we also need to state is that as we do our programming and we do our calendar year. Part of our programs, you will find that they are not always one-dimensional. You will find that our programs, in one activity that we do, we hit too many birds with just one stone. So when we do our classes of pathfindering, when we do the progressive classes, we are not only doing the spiritual lessons, but we are doing life skills, we are doing teaching of manners, we are doing teaching cooperation and interaction with other people. So there's a whole lot of things that get covered in one program. But if we are not aware of what the intention of the curriculum is, then we find ourselves just doing programs out of just the necessity of having a program. And when you read the manual says the Pathfinder year is based on a 10-month calendar. So and someone mentioned it earlier that we need not to also go into a space of competing with the family, where the family wants to go on a holiday in December and we have planned an investiture, and we put children in a position where they must now choose between the church and the family. So we need to also create room for that. And I think it is important that someone mentioned that we also try and assist children to prioritize their schoolwork and not only focus on the club and forget that there is also academic work that needs to be done. And of course, in the process of doing our programming, we need to take into consideration that the conference will also do its own meetings of people who are staff members of the Pathfinder Club. And today, here's an example of one of those meetings. The conference has called us in to come and empower us and to give us the right and necessary tools to do what needs to be done. And here's an interesting one that the manual speaks about, which is the scoring that comes from the conference. So there's an expectation that the conference would, throughout the year, assess, monitor, and score our yearly plans and look at what we are doing versus what is expected, and give us feedback on our progress, whether we are walking the right path or we need to change the course that we are taking. And I think I need to also make a disclaimer that part of the challenge with the ministry in general, you find that there is what is written and there is what is practiced. And it is not a bad thing. Pastor Ramba will correct my mess if I'm creating a mess. But it is not always necessary that we feel bad on being innovative and coming up with new ideas in terms of our programming and venturing into a space of doing what might not be written in the manual. But it is important that we also do it in consultation with the conference and not do it on our own. So you find that there are instances where the manual would tell us that this is how it ought to be done. But context is important in our programming because we need to reach the needs of our children. As a way of an example, if you do not have a planetarium in your village, we cannot expect you to take the kids to a planetarium, but we can also expect you as part of your programming and calendar of events that you get an astronomer to come and maybe in the rural area there, deep where it's dark and there are no lights and the stars are visible, and you actually do your stars honor there, but to take the resources that you have and use them. And sometimes you'll be surprised that if you were to bring an older person who was there before there was a campus, they know a lot about stars. So you bring them in to come and enrich the content of your programming. And it is important also that as we do our programming, we keep a record of what our programs does. So for as a way of an example, there's a Pathfinder record class card, which lists the requirements of what needs to be done throughout the year. And you get the relevant persons to come and sign off on those activities that need to be signed off on. And the manual is very ambitious and says the secretary of the club must keep these cards filed somewhere. And sometimes we don't have the resources to do that. But of course, we need to be innovative as well as we go through some of these things, because the world of technology has given us innovative tools like smart devices that can be used to keep a soft record of some of the things that we do. And the counselors and unit scribes need to receive these cards and make use of them. Of course, the manual gives 2 options of what can be used: a passport for each Pathfinder or the card system. And of course, if a passport is done, it is advisable that it is uniform, and it is something that is done from the division level. It's something that can be recognized. And the reason why we speak of uniformity is because we do not want you to do something and you move to a different part of the world and you get there only to find that someone there says, but we don't know what this is. But if it is a World Church recognized system that we are using, then we know that what we are doing is acceptable to everyone. But also, it is important that we know that a permanent record needs to be kept, at least for the Pathfinder. Part of what we find ourselves sometimes struggling with is that you find that Pathfinders finish their curriculum, and when they are at a certain age, they don't have a record of what they have done, but they would like to pick up and continue. Like some of us who are doing Master Guide at this stage in our lives, but we have no record to prove what we did previously. So it is important that those kinds of things are kept in record so that everyone can have something to refer to. And it is important that we follow a teaching plan in our programming. And this should be followed according to our resource manuals that instruct us on what we need to do for teaching. And there needs to be, and the way that the curriculum is also structured, it's structured in such a way that it should be able to fit within a 10-month period, and we should be done with the work. So part of our programming sits down to plan on how we will teach and how we will accomplish and finish the curriculum within stipulated times. Regular meetings according to the club needs. Now, brethren, this is very important. I cannot overemphasize it. It is important that we do not just meet for the sake of meeting, but we meet because there's a need. So when we meet to fulfill certain requirements and needs. And the club needs to choose for itself what works best. And if you refer to the Pathfinder Basic Staff Manual, you will notice that there is Model A and Model B in terms of the nature of meetings that we can have. Model A basically gives us a 3-hour session without any interruption, but Model B breaks it down into segments of what can be done. And part of the programs that we need to plan for, or that should feature in our programming for the Pathfinder Club, it's and sorry, this is what you would find on Model A: opening ceremony, drill, devotionals, curriculum, games, fair practice, hobbies, honors, craft, closing ceremony. I wanted to draw our attention to this slide so that we think of it this way. So here is a program that is done at a local Pathfinder club, but it is done in view of the global picture of the program of pathfindering. So when we do our curriculum, we are doing our curriculum in view of the investiture. When we do our games or fair practice, we are doing it in view of the Pathfinder fair that is coming. When we do hobbies, honors, and crafts, we are doing those in view of the booths that we will set up at the Pathfinder programs, Pathfinder fairs, we go there. And in the case of the Trans-Orange Conference, sometimes we set up our booths as well at the Camporee to showcase our crafts. It could be leather, it could be plastic, it could be wooden crafts. So we bring those together in the closing ceremony. So basically this gives us an overview of what our programming and the shape that it could take. When you read the manual, of course, it speaks of a Pathfinder fair as a one-day event where you bring floats, booths, parade, and the judges, of course, who are organized by the conference. The location is sent out on time so that all of us can prepare for it. But of course, we know in the case of the Trans-Orange, our hosting conference as we speak today, due to the sheer size of the conference and the number of clubs, the last time I attended a Pathfinder fair, we had over 200 clubs that showed up, which makes it very difficult for the event to be ran in one day. But part of what our programming should involve, it is preparation for such programs. Camporees, which are also conference events that are set up. And part of what we need to ensure that our programs achieve is that competition should be discouraged, brethren. And I know that we as human beings sometimes struggle with it because we are very competitive naturally. And so part of our programming, part of our activities must be geared towards the Pathfinder competing against a standard, and that standard is a personal standard and not against club members or other clubs. And part of what is critical about that is that we need to create an atmosphere of Pathfinders who support and encourage one another and not compete with one another. Number two, the other point that we want to bring is nature conservation in our programming. We need to leave one thing and one thing only behind, and I'm sure camping skills will speak to that, our footprints and nothing else. But also our programming should be mindful of the Sabbath and keeping the Sabbath holy. I know that sometimes we struggle with issues of the Sabbath because we find ourselves having to rush through some of the activities just to ensure that all the requirements are met. And I think because we don't do our programming properly, and sometimes because we don't get the buy-in from all stakeholders, and when I say stakeholders, I'm referring to the church, I'm referring to parents, I'm referring to everyone who forms part of our Pathfinder club. Because we do not get enough support, we find ourselves scrambling for Sabbath hours because that's the time where parents have brought their children. And this is the only time where we think we can capitalize on their presence and do what needs to be done. And of course, part of our programming needs to prepare for investiture to ensure that all the work is completed. And there's an interesting thing that is there in the manual which speaks to spot testing, which is a very scary thought. So we need to be mindful as well of the time and context we are operating in. You don't want to overly stress the children and test them right there on the spot, and they end up being anxious to a point that they are worried whether they will be invested or not because they answer the question right or wrong and all of that. And that is why you would find that conferences avoid spot testing most of the time and do assessment prior to the investiture, so that hopes are not created unnecessarily, and so that no unnecessary pressure is exerted on the children. And the church manual, the basic staff training manual also speaks of a Pathfinder rally, a once a year district or conference event, which is coordinated by area coordinators in conjunction with the conference. And I want to stop there for a few seconds because, like I said, I know that we have read what is in the manual, and I know that you have prepared yourself for this day by reading what is on the manual. So when you speak of things like Pathfinder Fairs, Pathfinder Camporees, the structure of camping that is recommended, there is a designation between genders, males and female, and supervision by adults or caregivers that come with the children to ensure that they comply and do that which is needed to be done at the event. And of course, when we were speaking of the Pathfinder Rally is that one calendar event that gives us an opportunity to come, sit together, reflect on what our club is doing, reflect on what needs improvement, what needs to be, what needs we have, and how best we can improve our clubs, and what else needs to be maybe shared even at a conference stage or conference level. And Brother Lindani, I know that I have 1 hour. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can check if there are questions and if there's some form of interaction that is needed. But I think I have tried to summarize as best as I can within an hour what is written on the manual.
Okay, Mfu, thank you. Any questions? Let me check here on the chat if there are any questions that are written there.
And Brother Haba says, please send question. He says, take pictures only and nothing else.
Hey.
Yes, yes. And I think, brethren, we need to be very, very clear that our intention is to say to us in our programming, and I'm going to just repeat myself for emphasis, in our programming, there are camps that we will do as a local club. There are trips that we will go on. Some of the activities will be done in-house, in the backyard at our church. Some of them will be done at a park and all of that. Our programming needs to have the best interest of the child at heart and nothing
Amen.
else. And the recording of the activities of the children is critical. If you go to the school and you ask for a report for your child, they will be able to give you a report. So in a similar way, when we do our programs, our activities, we need to keep a proper record for future purposes and future reference, so that any child at any given time can come back and get their record and know what they have done. And as a way of wrapping up my talk, we need to also know that there's a difference between conference programs, district programs, local church programs. And remember, all of us are working for the benefit of the children. And someone is, before I answer how are passports used for recording? Unfortunately, you do not have them in the TransOrange conference. But if we can assist you quickly, if you remember when we go to a camporee, there's always a passport that we give the children. So when a child has completed a certain activity, then there's a stamp that is put or a signature. That's why when I was presenting earlier, I said, then the relevant persons come and sign off on what the kids have done. But of course, the manual encourages that it should be a uniform document. It must not be our own invention, but it must be an invention of the division that then sends it to us. But if our division does not have a passport, then we can confine ourselves to a class record. And most of us here are baptized. You would remember that during Sabbath school, there are those cards that they distribute where we sign and fill in stuff. So we need to have those for record keeping. The questions sometimes come quickly and some disappear, some appear. I hope I've answered what was asked.
I'm trying to check other questions, Mfu, that were asked earlier, maybe, to see if there are any.
Yes. And someone is saying, of course, we can use a class card where we tick off what has been covered and we can sign on files in the context. And I know there's a question mark at the end, but I have no issues with what the person has said. It can actually be done in the context of COVID and seeing its tenure is not certain. What changes to the programming do you anticipate or suggest for the meanwhile? And this is what we love about the pathfindering ministry. We saw on social media where clubs became innovative around their programs. I'm pastoring churches where we are busy with our progressive classes, and we've been doing them on Zoom. When the rest of the church is closed, I've been working. Our churches have been on Zoom from the first day the church is closed. I mean, I'm busy doing elections on Zoom as we are speaking. So we need to take advantage of what COVID has also given as gifts, like Zoom, where we've seen camps done in the backyard at home, where children log on, they sleep in their tents in the backyard, but come out during the day and log on for programs of the day. And Zoom has beautiful facilities like breakaway rooms where you can put different children in different classes and fulfill that which needs to be done. But of course, we know not everyone has access to such facilities. And what we may want to try and do is to encourage parents to join in with us and assist us, where we get material delivered to the homes of the children, and the parents go through the activities with their children, and with the relaxation as well of the lockdown regulation, it would be easier to operate as a smaller club than as a bigger club. But of course, we take guidance from the church itself. But the space of technology has been one of that came as a blessing in disguise. So we need to be innovative and find ways. And where it's not accessible, let's go back to the analog age and do things manually where we can.
Mfu,
yes, sir.
Eugene Dube is saying, what is the formal definition of club programming?
What is the formal definition of club programming? It's not there in the manual. and we tried to, as best as we can, give you an idea of what club programming is about. So programming is a program, but one that is mission driven. Objectives, aims must be fulfilled. Number two, it must be geared towards the club and not necessarily fulfilling certain things that we think we need to do. when does it actually start? I hope I've answered that question. Someone is asking, when does it actually start? It starts preferably when the school calendar starts, or somewhere there around January. And this is now within the South African context, because then we are able to run with the school calendar, and where there are school vacation periods, we jump into those spaces and do what we can do. But preferably when we start in January and finish by October, then we are also not competing with the final examinations that children must do at school. So we then lessen the tension between the competition that is there between church and school.
Is saying, please help me to understand the purpose of a Pathfinder Fair, because it seems to promote competition among clubs and among children. Please help me understand the whole idea.
Yeah. So if you speak in our current context, the idea is not to compete, but to showcase the skills of the different clubs, their interpretation of programs, their ability to work well together, and to do that which has been outlined. So when we go to a Pathfinder Fair, we are not going there because we are hunting for the position 1 trophy, but we are going to the fair to showcase our club and what it is capable of doing, and how we can work well together as a club. Now, once you have tokens sitting on a table, it's easy for people to forget and focus on the trophy on the table at the expense of what the club is meant to be showcasing. So our request and plea is that we, as the leaders from the grassroots, let's encourage our young people that here is a standard set by the Pathfinder Fair activity or Pathfinder Fair manual. Here are the activities. Here's how it must be done. Here's how long it should be done. Do you think you can beat this standard that is written in the book? Not do you think you can beat the Dube Club? Do you think you can compete against this standard and beat it? Let's beat this record and do it better.
Umuzwake Shabalala is saying, can we not also use the class card for ticking off what has been covered, including signed files or notes?
Yes, and I think we are not opposed to that. We have even said some of these things you can convert them and make them soft copies. The world is going digital. Why not turn some of these things digital as well and store them up in the cloud somewhere where we know that the record will never disappear?
Agrippa Mamunze, in the context of COVID and seeing its tenure is not certain, what changes to the programming do you anticipate or suggest for the meanwhile?
Yeah, I think I touched on that one. That's where I was saying let's utilize some of the gadgets and tools that COVID has also blessed us with, like these platforms that we are on. But if we can't go into these kinds of platforms because data is expensive, let's also try and go the manual route, but get the involvement of the families to try and achieve what we need to achieve.
Your general says, please involve Pathfinders as a leader when doing programming, as they will give some ideas on what they will do.
Correct. And I think, brethren, we cannot overemphasize that point. The trouble of cooking a pot, and then we know how children can be. They come and look at you and say, you could have fried the sausages instead of making stew. So the more stakeholders are involved, and that's why I said at the beginning, more talk and discussions and deliberations during planning before we get to execution, so that we don't leave anyone behind.
Fatzai says, yesterday we discussed about community pathfinder. I think it was CPC for evangelism. Sometimes one gets in an area where there is no church. can one fully implement the curriculum to children in the community with the support of a local church?
We have seen wonders in this space where people move into a community and reach the children before they reach the parents. And it is important, I think that presentation would have spoken about that the role of pathfindering in terms of clubs that are not necessarily associated with the church is amazing. We have seen when we go on street parades, the train of children that follows the parade. So yes, reach out to communities where there's no Adventist presence. Start those clubs in those communities. Solicit the support of the local church next door. Yes, and they ought to join in because we are mission oriented more than anything else. I don't see why they should refuse to join that kind of an arrangement.
Kayaletu is saying, please explain the spot testing thing again, please.
Okay, so with spot testing, it's like me doing baptism. The church manual says I must check the readiness of the candidates before I baptize them. So part of what this would have entailed is that as we cover the curriculum and the candidates are presented for investiture, a question might be asked to the candidates. So you did the STARS honor. What is the Southern Cross? And you do a spot test like that, as you are busy with investiture. Yes, program director.
Dudu Sitlajile, I hope I pronounced it properly. Pastor, what should I do when the church sees the Pathfinder programs as an add-on and the club is expected to shelve its plan in lieu of church programs? Yes.
And it is a very sad reality where parents are willing and leaders are willing to sacrifice their children for reasons that, sometimes you ask yourself, if these kids would have sat in their class to do their work, would we have cars that are scratched? Would we have children climbing trees? Would we have children loitering on the streets because the program does not cover them at all? So it is critical that the parents buy into the concept, because if the parents and the church have not seen the importance of salvation and service that we seek to instill in the children, then, and I'm sorry to say, brethren, we are almost fighting a losing cause, because they are the ones who must be at the forefront protecting their children. So we can seek conference intervention, district intervention, local church pastors intervention, and ask the church to rethink their approach to youth ministries.
Shimane Mwabelo says, please also explain the 10-month calendar. When does it actually start?
Yeah, you remember I just said it now. Yes, we covered it.
There's always an argument there because according to, I think, the manual and the general conference, it starts after the World Pathfinder Day, which is in September, if I'm correct. Yes.
Yeah, but I think what we also need to remember is that the Adventist Church is spread out throughout the world. And some of the resources and material that we have might have been written in a different context and a different environment. And that's why it's important to contextualize our approach to the ministry. And the reason why we would ordinarily run away from September is because we are literally starting the Pathfinder curriculum going into the examination period. So we want to start as early as possible to avoid that unnecessary competition.
Okay. Alicia Jomo says the notebooks as well need to have the signature for proof if it happens that the passport gets lost. And then Susan Mchadi says, do passports expire? Can they be used anytime to buy badges?
And I think the answer is loud and clear in what has been said. Remember, brethren, the whole idea is to keep a record for the Pathfinder themselves as well. So if honors are lost, we've had instances where people steal someone's sash with all the honors. We need some form of record that will justify why they can get the honors back. So we need to have those in place. So yes, they can be used for the purchase.
Ujabulile Zingeni, is there any problem with combining pathfinding program with the social programs by government in the community?
And remember, our key feature and our key guiding principle in the Pathfinder ministry: salvation, service, salvation, service. So where best to go than to those institutions where there's underprivileged children, and we go spend a day with them and lighten their burden and their loads. Definitely.
Before, I will not read Yagashimani. He's coming with some noise that is not going to end. He's talking on the competition thing. But for interest's sake, he's saying life is a competition, and I don't think there is anything wrong with a little bit of competition.
Just as long as it's against the standard and not other clubs. Yes.
Lulu Sizani from Littleton Church. What is the future of camps going forward?
It's an interesting debate, brethren. I mean, what is the future of church going forward? How many of us are even comfortable going back into the same church space? What is COVID going to give birth to? We think COVID is gone, then this one arises and that one arises. So we need to be innovative and think afresh and say, can we afford to continue the same way we have been? And if not, what are the alternatives? And that's why we need leaders like yourselves to come into the picture and pitch in and give us ideas on how we can best reach the child going forward.
Let's have those that will ask live. Mamu Cynthia Dlamini. Cynthia Dlamini.
Okay. Afternoon. Yes, how are you?
Fine, Mama.
Good, good.
Yes, I'd just like to ask, I hear the live stream and the Zoom part or that we are doing now, we really appreciate. But now our challenge is, what about those kids? Since lockdown, we are unable to reach them. Parents can't afford the data. And then question number 2, how is the assessment going to be done? Because we are not sure if whether we are going back to church, because we are still in level 1. We don't know what is the next step of the nation or the president is going to say. So how are we going to do the assessment?
All right. Yeah, you see, sometimes pastoring other churches gives us a few ideas. I have a church that I'm currently pastoring. And what the church has decided to do is, from its coffers, they've decided to buy devices. And these devices belong to the church. And they have taken them and put them in areas or families where there was issues of affordability. They've even put data on those devices so that everyone can have a fair opportunity of attending church. We've even asked members to donate their devices that are not used. And during lockdown, I actually discovered that it's cheaper to buy data for a day than to buy it for the whole month. And that is if you are buying for someone else. Of course, when you buy for yourself, you buy for the whole month. So I have churches that have bought day bundles, like 1 gig for 29 rands for the whole day, so that they enable everyone to join into the picture. Mom Cynthia, sometimes it's not possible to even do what I've just said now. And that's why I was saying we might want to try the analog method and not the digital method. But of course, it also depends on whether parents have bought into the vision. If they have not, then it's a problem, because the church could have provided and made the resources available and deliver them at the respective families so that work can continue. And from time to time, adult to adult, there can be conversations of checking the progress and challenges if they are there, so that we try and assist the child. But unfortunately, sometimes parents are not even willing, or sometimes they don't even have time to do it. So we need to find, over and above what I've just said, additional creative ways of doing it.
Thank you for
Okay.
And then on the one of the assessment, Mam Dlamini, I will leave that one to Pastor Rambam and Brother Lindani.
And then Bongani Lunga. Lunga.
Hello, afternoon, everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
My point was actually on the awarding ceremonies. That as leaders we must create not competition as such, but we need to award the kids that that have done well during the year. Like what we usually did way back. We used to do some ceremonies like the best pathfinder of the year, the smartest pathfinder. It will encourage kids to be active in the pathfinding. So basically, when we do those programs, it helps them to be part of the program, and the programming will be very much, when you venture into the next year, everyone will want to be the best pathfinder of the year. So those awarding ceremonies are very important. It encourages kids to be well mannered and all those things. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And someone spoke
sir.
about continuous assessment, Brother Lindani, on the site here. It is important, brethren, that we note that none of us want to trap the children and fail them if there's such a thing in the church. The idea is that you must always remember, when you are teaching a child in a Pathfinder class, let's say friend class, you are in essence teaching that child salvific messages. So the idea is that we must not just do shortcuts and quickly rush through things. We must remember that salvation is also at stake.
Thank you, Mfu. Now we have a hand from Welcome. Welcome.
SG, maybe before welcome.
Okay.
On the continuous assessment that has been suggested here, we feel that we are training master guides, and these master guides, they must be able to help the pathfinders to do the continuous assessment. Our plan this year as a conference was that by June we are going to do mid-term assessment. So which means before we come, the master guides will have done the work. And then as a conference, we come and do our midterm assessment. And by October, we were coming for the final assessment, working hand in hand with the master guides in that particular district. So the continuous assessment is there, but needed to be done by master guides so that when the conference comes, because also it's expensive, it's very expensive to transport people to come and do assessment maybe every month or every week. But I think it can work better if we hold hands together with the master guides. And then we do, as a conference, we do the midterm and the October one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mfu. Welcome.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to participating for the presentation. Mine is more of a request and not a question. And my request is that in our future conference programs, especially events, can we include events that will be possible for differently abled kids? I'm requesting this because since the CPCs are starting, there are kids that are from the communities and they are differently able. And it's difficult to involve them in the program, especially activities that we do. Maybe I'm a Pathfinder Fest, for example. It's difficult to have some of the events to have them to participate because they are unable to do what everyone can do. So can we have at least activities that can also accommodate the differently abled kids? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Brother, welcome. You, flesh and blood did not reveal that unto you. The world is changing, the needs of the child are changing, and we need to keep up with those. And let not anyone be excluded from a program because of a challenge which is physical or whatever, and they cannot become part of the programs. It's important.
Thank you, Mfu. General. General.
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to encourage leaders and say it is important when you're doing your programming, have an official opening of your club and an official closing of your club, especially when you're closing for the year. Some kids, when you ask them, do you guys close? They don't even know what is closing and opening of the club. For example, in the manual, there is something that says merit certificate. Ubongani mentioned about giving something to kids when they've done something that whatever that they've done. So I normally encourage leaders and say, at the end of the year, even after your investiture, before kids go for holidays and all that, organize a special closing ceremony that you are doing for the club. That says, we are closing for this year, we're going to open next year. And as we're closing, we have a best Pathfinder of the year. We have a best discipline Pathfinder of the year. We have best of whatever. You give them those tokens to encourage them that next year when they come back, kids will come back with a different view when it comes to the club. Because I know I was a Pathfinder, I used to like the fact that says, you are the best Pathfinder, you are the most dressed Pathfinder, you are the most disciplined Pathfinder of the year. So kids, they love those things. So I'm encouraging leaders that let's not just go for holidays, but have that special program that you organize for them and we say, we are closing the year. Probably that must happen after the investiture. And beginning of the year, when we are starting again, have a small program that you are bringing your Pathfinders together and you say, guys, we are starting our year this year, and this is what we are going to do and all that. And you are also going to be encouraging them to be part of the club.
Thank you, General. The last hand is Zanele Sibanda or Wanda Sibanda. Zanele Sibanda or Wanda Sibanda. That is supposed to be our last hand.
And as Zanele is coming to the mic, I was listening to Brother Ngono speaking. I will see when Zanele is unmuted and I'll stop talking.
Okay.
I was listening to him as he's speaking and saying he's opening a can of anacondas on us. Because someone will say just exactly what is typed there. So when you give others this award and then others don't get, and then suddenly there's competition in the club and whatnot and whatnot. Now, brethren, we must just always know children mimic to a very great extent us as adults. You know, when you speak to social scientists, they'll tell you about cognitive social learning, where behavior is learned from and mimicked because of what adults do. We need to create, not even create, we need to nurture an environment that is non-competitive, but that can also appreciate excellence where it is seen. I mean, we can't get to a stage in our lives where now we can't even say to a child, well done, because we are afraid that the other child will feel, oh, now I come to class and no one ever says well done to me. And that's why it's important that we know our children, and our aim should be the child, not to belittle other children, but to know John is good with hands, Martha is good with organizing. And you create an environment that makes all of them excel in their different areas of excellence and reward them for it so that they are able to be encouraged to continue excelling.
Okay, Mfu, the last one we are reading from Pastor Kumar from Sri Lanka Mission. He's saying some churches look at the Pathfinder Club as an army or force, or as an army force and military training base. What is your advice on this to the parents? That would be the last question.
And I think, brethren, when we look at the investiture program, part of what we try and do is to demystify some of the myths around the issue of the symbols, the tokens, and the uniform and all of that. It is important that we sometimes take time to educate the community, to educate people, have open days of pathfindering, display what you do, so that people see that we are not a paramilitary structure, but we are a more of a social, well, and I'm using this conservatively, a club that seeks to improve on the social skills and spiritual well-being of children. Unfortunately, people mainly see us in uniform more than they see us doing the knots. So it's important that we do open days and showcase and bring in people to see what our symbols stand for, what we stand for as a ministry and as a club, so that we do not find ourselves creating the wrong impression unnecessarily.
Thank you, Pastor Sikani, for a well-presented presentation. Pastor Rambau?
This is the point where you give me a gift, Brother Lindani.
Yes, I pass it from the director. The director gives it to me, and then I pass it as the secretary. I pass it from the director to you.
You can email the gift. I accept emailed gifts as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mfu, for the powerful job that you've just done. Siabong, I thought this thing is out now in your mind, but I can see you are still in touch with the Pathfinders, and you are doing a good job. And thank you so much, Mfu. Your present is coming. We are going to WhatsApp it. No, thank you. This marks the end of our program. Now we are going to meet again at, is it 3? SG, is it 3 o'clock?
Is it not supposed to be now at 2?
So we're going to have Pastor.
Then I'm checking. Oh, it's at 3.
Yes, we are going to have Pastor Vusikumalo again, taking us at 3, and then after that we have our last session of the day, and we meet tomorrow. Let's take this break. Let's go and rest and come back exactly 3 o'clock or 2:45, so that we set up and everything will be fine.
In an hour's time, yes. Thank you, Mfu.
Who's praying for us now, SG?
Okay. I was going to ask Pastor Chefu. Please pray for us. Just raise your hand so that I can unmute you. Pastor Chefu. Someone is typing.
Okay, let's be praying.
Okay.
Our kind and loving Father, we thank you for a day granted us. We thank you for your blessing. We thank you, Lord, for keeping up with us as we go through this basic staff training. Continue to be a blessing upon us and continue to bless abundantly those that are leading out in the program. This we pray in the loving name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We meet in an hour's time.
welcome. Please come to my WhatsApp. Welcome to my WhatsApp.
Is there any other announcement, Mfu, before I end the meeting?
No.
Okay.